are now listening to the Primal Human podcast, where you'll learn many invaluable skills to mastering yourself. I am Nick Cortez. And welcome to the 5th episode of the Primal Human podcast. Now, this episode is based on the generations and how generations change with times, and how last generations was different, and 50 years ago was different, 100 years ago was different, and they all kind of take this shape that makes them unique to that generation. Everybody knows the hippies, knows millennials now, baby boomers. They all have something that they brought to that time span that makes that generation unique. And we like to think, when we, to begin the discussion, we like to think that we're born and we have our own thoughts. This is something I discussed in the group dynamic. Generation, it's like a brother and sister type, the group dynamic and the generational dynamic, or the generational rationality, which is what this episode is about. So we like to think that we're all free thinkers and everything we do out of free will, but really the group, and even more importantly our generation, kind of influences us to think certain terms. This is why usually all millennials think alike, and they all unite and say, oh, people are old, like okay, boomer. I think I said that on another episode. So we like to think we're free thinkers, but really our generation has more to do with the way we view certain issues, whether it be in politics or religion. Usually nowadays most people are pretty anti-religion, or not necessarily anti, but they don't believe in it, and to each his own. But that's the truth. The truth is that nowadays people don't like to believe in that stuff. However, they still believe in zodiac signs. They got the zodiac app on their phone. You know who I'm talking about. I know you're watching this. So, people still believe in that, but they'll criticize religion. So they kind of go against old ways of thinking and end up to rebel against the older, people. So how to tell if a generation, how to spot or see what the dynamic is of that generation. For like certain generations, you see the type of music that is booming in that era. Like in the 80s, there was hard rock. It was a huge difference from music before in the 70s and the 60s, where the 60s was all Jimi Hendrix or the Beatles, where it was all really hippie, and this with the Who, it was all laid back. And in the 70s, it was kind of a mix of rock, or more rock and roll, but not super hippie-ish. And then the 80s, that's when the hard rock, Guns N' Roses, Metallica, Aerosmith, all those hard rock bands came along, and they came loud, and it really was the signature music of that era, in my opinion. In the 90s, you have hip hop, which I believe was probably the biggest. You had Tupac and Biggie, and rappers like that defied that generation musically. Now, this could be a personal opinion, but I feel like when I think of decades in music, that's usually what I think about. I listen to many different music genres, and nowadays we're getting into a more pop oriented. In the 2010s, we started to see a rise in electronic dance music. Electronic dance music had been around for a while, but in the 2010s is when it really took off with dubstep and other artists like that. And that's usually a trend. Also, in generations, we tend to see different styles. In the 90s, they had that, I forgot the name of the girl from Friends, Jennifer Aniston. She had every girl had that haircut. Or in the 80s, they had the big women had like the big hair, or even the metal hair. Guys in metal bands or rock bands had that long hair. Nowadays, people usually have like their own style, but you do see a trend in styles. When you look at any video of haircuts throughout the decades, you can see a clear change. Now, Now, yeah, there's many trends that define a generation, but specifically what really defies a generation or shapes the generation of what it's going to be is usually something historical, a historical event that takes place as that generation is coming up. So for a kid who's growing up now, it would be COVID, or the political, the certain political climate or setting we're in right now. I'll give going back historically, we're looking at baby boomers. With baby boomers, you could say that were defined by the Great Depression and World War II. This led them to be, wanting to be more secure with money, since because of the Depression. And then they made kids that saw their parents be wanting to be all secure with money. And the kids were then the 60s kids, the hippies, or kids that were born in the 50s and then became the 60s, love, peace, love, hippies of the 60s. And they became that was symbolized by free expression, free love, spirituality, be yourself or whatever. And then in turn, they made kids that would be the opposite of what those hippies were. And they felt maybe those hippies were too free and wouldn't give as much attention to their kids. And then the kids were kind of the opposite. I'm not saying this for everyone, but usually it is for that big generational change. Lately, now we have the people growing up around my age. We were defined by the war in Iraq and the financial crisis of 2008. And now we are, we want to make money. But we also say that we want to be free-spirited and accept everyone, especially now, the 1960s. Okay, anyway, so yeah, it's usually what defies a generation of, a certain historical event that takes place that defies what that generation will essentially grow up into and what they'll be shaped into. So now, a quick prediction, what's gonna make these kids now with COVID. I don't consider COVID to be as bad as it was, in a sense of, oh my God, this is a black plague, it's gonna kill 1 million people. No, but I consider it to be very, it's pretty crazy when they lock everything down. And I never thought I'd have to live through something like this. So I feel like kids will probably end up being more free or wanting to be more free. But I'm not really sure. I'm not an expert at it. But I'm sure COVID will have some type of effect, along with the political setting we're living in now. Well, we're looking at how each generation wants to have something that they emphasize to be at. So for the 1960s, the love movement, the love free movement, free love movement, they wanted to just be free and no materialistic stuff. But underneath, you see, like, this is something I talked about in the mask episode, or the dark side episode, was people wear a mask and they want to show that mask out in the group. Now, when they say that, oh yeah, free love, we don't care about this, but there's always something underneath that person or that group is repressing. For the hippies back then, it was, they wanted the hippest drugs, the best clothes, the best music, the best, and this is kind of like what's happening now, I feel. When we look at movements now, we have the progressive movement, which is what's really taking over now, which I believe is what this generation is being shaped into, I think it's at the end of it, honestly, because it's getting way too out of hand. Now, each generation, they want to break free from whatever the past was. I feel like in the last 10 years, it's certainly been the LGBTQ community that have been shaping the past decade. and we look at it from the point where gay marriage was legalized to now progressivism, I don't know if that's a word, has completely taken over the media, and cancel culture is insane. It's out of control. They're trying to cancel everybody. If you say anything mildly offensive, you will get canceled. You see this on Twitter all the time. I think I talked about this on a past episode, but everybody's getting canceled. And I feel like the coming generation that's going to grow up from all this canceling is eventually going to get tired of it because they're getting too crazy. One of the things I saw that was kind of crazy was the Amazon app recently updated their logo. It's a little box. I'll put it right here. So it can take you a second to look at that. And they said that this logo looked like Hitler mustache. Now, I never thought about that, but I saw that on the news and I thought it was crazy. So Amazon had to change the logo because somebody said that it looked like Hitler. Now that's crazy. But enough about that. Cancel culture, I think eventually the next generation that grows up from that is eventually gonna think like you're crazy, you know, and they're gonna like completely stop being super cancelable. Now, this is another thing that I kind of want to add. Each generation adds something better to humanity. We don't want to think that just because we're this generation, then the old past generation sucked. Because each generation that has been around has shaped the way we think and has essentially made it better. Not every generation is perfect. This is something we like to believe. We like to believe that we are the best, we're the most progressive, we're the most smartest, but really, we're just another part of human history, and we're gonna come and leave a footprint so that the coming generations can look at that and know what worked and what didn't work. So for the 1960s, we had the civil rights movement, and everybody, and you know, we saw that all humans are created equal, and now, you know, that gives equal rights to African Americans. Now we're doing, like I said, the LGBTQ community, and now they have the right to, you know, marriage and, you know, other rights probably coming. I don't want to get into too much of it because this is not a politics podcast. It's just something that I'm pointing out in current events that are happening. Like you see more and more LGBTQ community people outside, and yeah. But again, cancel culture, this is gonna be a huge backlash, I predict, where eventually people are just gonna get tired of it, of people canceling everyone. It's just getting way too out of hand. So, like I said, we can also look at other ways to see what a generation currently is by what that generation laughs at or what their comedic reliefs are. Now, like I said, cancel culture everywhere. You can't escape it. But even now, you see shows like one of my favorite all-time things that I think you guys should check it out. Dave Chappelle. Most people know Dave Chappelle. He had the Chappelle Show on Comedy Central. He has a stand-up special on Netflix. It's called Sticks and Stones. It is hilarious. It is politically incorrect to the bone, and we look at that and we shouldn't laugh about that because, you know, we're so against all the jokes that he says on there because, you know, we're against, he makes jokes about the LGBT community, some about abortion, some about yeah, it is just politically incorrect all around. And all this stuff that our generation is supposed to be progressing towards, we laugh at because it's funny. And that is that's our dark side of our generation, which is why I said the generation is about progressivism and moving forward. Like I said, the last 10 years I feel have been about LGBTQ. And yeah, essentially cancel culture trying to take it anything. And you'll still see cancel culture everywhere. Specifically, this Dave Chappelle documentary on Rotten Tomatoes, yeah. On Rotten Tomatoes, the critics gave it spoiled tomatoes, or I forgot the name of the bad reviews, but the audience loves it. because again, cancel culture is everywhere. Just another pointing that out. So yeah, that's one way to see what the generation's drive is and how to, spot it. So by understanding where our generation stands, we can try to take advantage of that and not be so confused as to or upset at why the times are the way they are, because we'll know that eventually they will end, and maybe we might even be able to take advantage of it. Taking advantage of it in what way? Now, there's certain people that I can point out that have taken advantage of. One of them is Elon Musk. Now, nowadays we care so much about climate change. I heard about it as a kid. Nowadays you hear it even more. They're trying to get rid of all gas-powered cars by 2030 or 2035, something like that. I'm not sure the exact statistic, but they're trying to get rid of all, gasoline-powered vehicles. And what was the thing about gasoline-powered vehicles when I was a kid? I remember Priuses were lame. They were lame. They were slow. Ew, a Prius, ew. And there's polls. I can't really put them out, but I have seen these polls. I have heard about these polls years ago, that people that drive Priuses only do it because they can say, oh, look at me, I'm saving the environment. And I think that is so stupid. Yeah, I think it's stupid, I'm gonna be honest. But what did Elon Musk do? He made Tesla. Now, I don't really want a Tesla because, don't get me wrong, it's cool, it's techie, but not for me. I wanted something cool. You see my car, I'm not gonna show it again, Miata. So he has, he made Teslas, and Teslas are cool. He's the first Teslas are the first cars where people are like, I'm not really into fancy cars, but I want a Tesla. Because a Tesla looks like the Apple, it's like the Apple of cars, essentially, at this point. There's Ferrari, Lamborghini, but those are way too expensive for the average person. But a Tesla is actually realistic. They're not that expensive. So Elon Musk took advantage by making Tesla cool. He made electric cars cool, and essentially took advantage of that, because there's a lot of progressive people that are all climate change advocates, and they want to be green as hell. And hey, there's a Tesla right there, and it's cool, it's hip. So he created that, and he took advantage of what this generation was trying to do. Other, people that sell anything like marijuana related. Marijuana will probably be legalized federally or across the states essentially by 2030, I predict, at least. Probably even before. It's becoming way more decriminalized in each state by the year. I mean, I'm not sure the exact statistic, but I just know that it's, by when I was a kid, it was like so illegal and bad, and now it's like anybody can just smoke a joint outside. I mean, I'm not really sure, I don't smoke, but you know what I mean. So take advantage of the way the generation's trending and how everything is, being seen in a different light now, and we can start to probably get ideas of what that generation will be open towards. So on a final note, yeah, each generation will usually leave something behind, or leave the bad things of that generation behind, and then a new generation will come and will reshape or revitalize or remake what values they feel like they need to throw out. And then another generation will come and will take the values from that generation and will leave a little bit of the bad parts behind them. Essentially, yeah, the cycle will keep going and keep going, and the human race will eventually just get better and better and better until the best values are kept. This is why we don't have kings anymore. Slavery, I think it's largely gone in most parts of the world. I think in Hong Kong in China, they have that. They have some slavery over there, slavery camps. I think it's based on religion, I'm not really sure. But usually those bad things that we had in the past are usually gone by now, and we further become a better species of humans. And remember, by understanding our generation, we can take advantage of it financially, make money on it. If we can find out something that that generation wants or seeks, how we can get attention or more power by portraying an image of what that generation is yearning to say, but they don't say it because it's not popular at the moment. AOC, MLK, Donald Trump. Finally, final, well, 5th episode, Primal Human Podcast. I'm Nick Cortez. Hope you enjoyed it.